Warning: some of these stories might be unsettling to some listeners, so please be prepared. Shortly after graduating from high school in the year 1998, I woke up one morning and found my father dead in our living room. I tried giving CPR, but he was already dead by the time I came out. I suffered PTSD from this event and would regularly have nightmares where I would be walking to the living room and I would realize what I was about to see and I would start screaming before I got there. And then I would wake up screaming. This lasted about a year, where I was not a functioning human being. I would stay awake for days to not experience the dream over again. Then one day, I had a mental breakdown in the middle of the day. According to my girlfriend, who is now my wife, said I tensed up like I was having a seizure for about an hour straight. In my mind, I had to keep living out that morning over and over, but I would stop myself before I went into the living room with a primal scream, which my wife said I would do in real life as well, until I finally let myself go into the living room and see my father's dead body. After I came out of it, I did not have the nightmares anymore. Flash forward to the year 2005, I joined the army and I'm in Iraq. I was leading a convoy and we had intel that terrorists were sending children out in front of convoys to get them to stop and ambush them. As I'm driving, a kid runs out about 300 meters in front of my vehicle, and I froze. We had orders to run over anyone in our way, and I was dreading having to make this decision. My truck chief is screaming at me to floor it, so I do, and the kid dodges out of the way at the last second. When we got to the next forward operating base, I go to get some sleep, but I'm disturbed about the moral choices I had made that day. As I fall asleep, I have a nightmare that I am driving again, and the kid jumps out in front of me. This time, I run him over, but then stop feeling the horror of what I did. I go to check the body, and as I go around to the back of the truck, I get that same dread I used to. Somehow, in my brain, I remember my old nightmares and assure myself, it's not the same. As I get around the truck, I see my father's dead body, and I go straight into my primal screaming again, only to wake up screaming and running. I am at a full sprint, as I wake up and in a part of the base I don't recognize. I thankfully haven't suffered from these nightmares anymore, but I'm in constant fear of my own screwed up mind. I was with my boyfriend at the time. We were laying in my bed and the lights were out. We weren't talking, just both thinking. All of the sudden he rolls over and hugs me really tightly. I, of course, hug him back. But then this feeling just hit me. If I wasn't already laying down, it would have knocked me over. It was a total feeling of dread and panic, I'll admit. I have had panic attacks in the past. But this was not the same. I hugged my boyfriend back as hard as I could. I never felt a feeling like this before. My boyfriend is one of those people who always is really warm. But even in his arms, I felt ice cold. I could feel this evil, awful feeling, and it seemed like it was coming from the corner of my room. It was kind of like sensing your friend behind you when they aren't saying anything. I honestly believe there was a demon or something in my room. I got the courage to speak, and I said, "Jay, do you feel that?" And he said he did. The cold, evil feeling. This all happened in about 30 seconds to a minute. He decided to call his friend who was studying to be a youth pastor. I got up and turned the lights on and came back to the bed. He called Matt and put him on speakerphone. Matt prayed for us, and we both closed our eyes and listened, praying in our heads. When the prayer was done, the room felt lighter and it wasn't cold anymore. But after a little small talk afterwards, Matt asked, "Were you two talking while I was praying?" We were like, "Of course not. We were just listening." He said he heard, from the phone, a deep, gravelly voice telling him to stop, and he said he felt an awful, evil feeling overcome him while he was praying. This freaked me out. My boyfriend drove home immediately afterwards because he was super freaked out. I was kind of mad he wouldn't stay with me because I was scared too. I went in my dad's room to tell him I thought there is a demon that came into my room. He was sleeping though, and just muttered something about having a gun and he'd shoot it. Well, thanks, Dad. So, yes, I am convinced it was a demon. But it never came back, so why the hell did it come? That's the only problem I have with the whole thing. What was it trying to accomplish? I don't think I'll ever know. When I was about 8 or 9, my family lived in a house in a little hidden neighborhood on a cul-de-sac. It had a huge backyard, but there was a rusted-out trailer, the flat kind you use to tow dirt bikes and whatnot, in one corner of the yard. That area of the yard always gave us the creeps, so we never went over there. Neither did our dog. My two younger sisters shared a room, but they would come sleep in my room every once in a while because they said there were weird lights in their room. My parents passed it off as the street lights bothering them. One night, I woke up to this weird feeling of anger. It was like when you're standing next to someone that is murderously pissed at you. There was a shape of a person standing in the doorway, and a single red glowing light like the cherry of a cigarette. Both my parents smoke, so I thought it was one of them. I sat up and said, "Mom, Dad," but there was no response, and then the figure and the red light were gone. I pulled the covers over my head as quickly as possible and made myself into a tight little ball. Then there was a tug at the blankets at the bottom of the bed. I pulled the blankets back, and there was another tug. I was terrified and unable to move, so I just held on to the blankets as hard as I could. The tugging stopped, but I was frozen with fear. Eventually, I fell asleep again. When I asked my parents about it in the morning, both of them said they were asleep the entire night, and it must have just been a nightmare. Fast forward some 20 years. I used to have nightmares about the house, but especially the corner of the garage-turned-den, which looked like a black hole in my dreams. It was a one-story house, but I used to have dreams of running downstairs into the den where I knew if I went close to the black hole that something evil would get me. I also had dreams about other houses in the neighborhood being evil, and if I went to them for help, that I would die. My younger sister and I were talking about the house with our mom one night, and she described having almost the exact same nightmares. But we had never spoken about it before. In her dreams, she would run down the stairs into the kitchen, where the cupboards would be opening and closing by themselves. There would also be a man standing in the den near where I would see the black hole. Needless to say, all three of us were pretty creeped out. I've been by the house a few times and still get this eerie feeling when I come into the neighborhood. Maybe it was built on an Indian burial ground, or a graveyard that nobody knew about. Back in 2007, in December I think, I was sitting down playing video games with my friend. It was just a regular Saturday night. I was young, just messing around. Popped open a few Cokes and prepared to have fun. Now, I heard the doorbell ring and went to go see who it was. No one else but my friend and I were home, and getting the door was a foreign experience. Now the door to our house is all fancy and window painted, so you can see who is at the door way before you get there. I saw no one there, but it was around 8, so it was dark. I went up to confirm there wasn't a package or anything. Then I looked out by our front lawn. Just for a moment, probably less than 3 seconds, I saw the shadows of the streetlight. No one was standing there, but there was the silhouette of a tall man. It just seemed to morph the shadows to its figure. I chalked it up to my eyes playing tricks on me, and I went back to playing games. We played and played into the wee hours, sipping our beverages and sharing funny stories. My friend ran out of Coke, and being the gentleman I am, I left the room once more to get us some fresh drinks. The second I get out into the hallway, the ceiling lights morph into the same shadow. This is where I got creeped out. I backed up slow, called to my friend, and hoped I was just having my eyes play tricks on me. Then the lights went out. I screamed, ran to him, and had absolutely no idea what was going on. The lights turned back on again, and I haven't seen it since. There's a good chance that I was just being young and had heard too many ghost stories. But the coincidences that lined up, it just seems weird to me. Now I'm much older, and still to this day I double-check everything that might seem to look weird to me. I used to live way out in the country. Not desolate, but few neighbors and lots of land. It was summertime, so for me that meant very late nights on the internet. Our only computer was in the guest bedroom on the opposite side of the house from my room. The house is pretty wide, so I had to pass through 3 different rooms if I wanted to use the internet. So it's about 2 a.m., and I'm on the internet talking with friends or something. Anyway, some situation comes up where I need to get something from my room, so I exit the guest bedroom. I walk through the laundry room, tiptoe quietly through the kitchen, past my parents' bedroom because the floor creaks, and enter the living room. I'm 6 feet from my bedroom door when I hear this blood-curdling shriek coming from right beside my left ear, the side that the dining room table was currently on. As in, there is no space for anyone to stand there and actually start screaming. I sprinted to my room, slammed the door behind me, grabbed whatever I came for, I still don't know why, weapon maybe, and sat on the corner of my bed. The funny thing is that after a while of sitting on my bed, I eventually went back to the computer to tell my friends what just happened. The next morning, I asked my parents if my mother woke up shrieking that night, and they both just looked at me and shook their heads. That was my first and only strange experience in that house. So my grandparents, for some reason, had a way of always moving into haunted houses. The houses weren't really creepy, but they would always have weird, paranormal stuff happen. But to keep the story short, here's my experience. It was summer vacation, and I was around 14 years old. At this age, I always would stay up late, eating junk food and playing video games. Because of this, I could hear the vibration of anybody walking down the hallway. I was at the end of the hallway across from my grandparents, so if I heard someone walking, it would usually be my grandpa, getting some heartburn medication. It was a recognizable pattern, the sound of feet hitting carpet, as he makes his way down the hall to the medicine, and then back to the bedroom. It would be finished off with hearing my grandpa close his bedroom door. Then I started to notice something. Randomly throughout the night, I would hear these footsteps. If it was any later than 1, I would open the door, and nobody would be in the hallway. Staying rational, I assumed my grandpa just got inside his bedroom before I saw him. I got used to the sounds, since they weren't super loud or anything. It's just footsteps on a carpet. That's what I'm thinking. I'm just hearing things half the time. One night, I was laying in bed and just watching TV. The head of my bed shared the same wall as my bedroom door. One night, I heard the footsteps again, making their way down the hall. Then they come towards my end. Cool, I'm used to this, and I usually just ignore it. Could be my grandpa, could be the ghost. But then, the footsteps stop, and my doorknob makes a crazy clacking sound, as if someone is rapidly turning the doorknob without actually opening it. I jump out of bed, run to my door, and try to catch whatever it is. My grandpa can be funny and possibly messing with me. Nothing. Dark as night, quiet as can be. I open my grandparents' door slowly, and I'm greeted with snoring. Till this day, I never know what was messing with my door. About 4 years ago, I was ending my freshman year at college. I had lived in the dorms with a kick-ass roommate, and pretty much had a great experience altogether. Towards the end of my last semester, something seemed different in my hall of the dorms. We were all still our lively selves, but just walking into the dorms would give you this massive feeling of dread. We all wrote it off as the stress of finals approaching, but it just felt off. Well, one night after studying, I decide to hit the shower so I can just wake up and make my way to class in a few hours. Before I keep going, I should go ahead and set the layout of our hall and the bathroom. Our hall was one of many halls on a single floor. Each hall had 4 rooms that accommodated 2 people each. The entrance to the halls were massive steel doors with a small window located at one end, and across from it was the bathroom. It seriously felt like a prison block rather than a living quarter for college students. As for the bathroom itself, when you walked in, you were immediately met with 2 sets of sinks, 2 sinks aside, on your left and right, with massive mirrors facing each other, and creating that infinite loop of mirrors. Then past that, you had your 2 urinals and a toilet stall on your left, and 2 showers on your right. When facing the left set of sinks, you can clearly see into the showers from the mirror, if the door is open. And at the right set of sinks, you can see the reflection of the shower. The door of the bathroom was identical to the entrance to the hall, a massive steel frame with a small window that didn't allow for much of a view. With good reason. The door was propped open with a giant wooden wedge that couldn't be moved unless you were really trying to close that door. So back to the story. I'm all alone in the bathroom gearing up to go shower. I throw my change of clothes on the right side sink so that way I can reach around the stall and grab them. Once I set my stuff down, I happen to look up into the mirror and I can see in the distance something almost shimmering inside the shower stall. As I look at it, I notice that it slowly gets closer, like it's jumping from the furthermost layer to the next layer closer. I'm kind of unsettled, but I don't think much of it other than me coming down off of a massive caffeine kick. But it starts transitioning faster. As it gets closer, I can start making out details, but nothing vivid or striking. It's just a dark mass that looks like it's covered in hair. At this point, I'm freaking out hardcore since this thing is getting closer in the mirror, and I'm pretty much frozen to this one spot. As it gets to the 4th layer, I get the closest look at this thing I'll ever get, and I regret every minute of it. It wasn't hair, but some kind of long flowing veil. You could see through it partially, but from the torso down it was just solid black. And the face. I can't describe it. It was clearly human, but at the same time, it was so far removed. There were eyes. They were black but definitely glowing somehow. I only saw this for maybe 2 seconds at the most, but it's burned into my mind forever. Then the lights cut out and I hear the door slam. It's pitch black in the bathroom, so I can't see this thing anymore. I go to open the door, but it won't budge. And then this intense smell of blood hits me out of nowhere. And that's all I remember. I woke up later in the hospital, from what my friend claims he was on his way to go use the bathroom sometime after this happened, where he found me in the shower stall, with my shirt covered in blood from a massive nosebleed. He tried asking me what happened, and according to him, all I could respond with was, "It saw me," and I start freaking out. So he calls an ambulance, and they get me to the hospital. All the while I'm apparently freaking out, so they sedate me to get me to calm down. I just started getting back to reality, and around that time my parents show up, worried sick of course. I ask them what happened, and according to the doctors they believe I had a seizure. However, they ran CAT scans soon after I was cooperative enough to do so, and found no sign of any seizure occurring. Not to mention, epilepsy doesn't run in my family at all, and having taken Adoral countless times in the past, I've never had a similar side effect, neither hallucinations or potential seizures. To this day, I still can't bring myself to look into a mirror for more than a minute, and just being stuck in a room for an extended period will just cause me to break down. I've been to therapy going on 3 years because of this, and I've talked to countless religious leaders who, besides giving me the general, "Well, you should turn to God in times like these" talks, don't recognize that kind of pattern as anything demonic or evil. And the strangest thing is that before that incident, there were no actual claims of activity in those dorms. And since I left, there hasn't been any either. It was just that one isolated incident. So, I don't know if this is exactly scary, but it freaks me out. I live close to a Walmart, so when I need to go, I just walk there. But the trail takes you behind the store, then you have to walk along the side to get to the front. There's somewhat of a forest area all the way around the back and side of the store. My boyfriend and I were walking one night to get some stuff for root beer floats. As we were walking up the trail, we saw a black dog sniffing around. But it was very dark in color, and I jokingly said, "What if it's some sort of creature?" And the dog whirled its head around at that exact moment, looked at us, then took off at a speed I've never seen a dog run before. I'm talking like some The Flash speed. Pretty damn weird. So then a couple months later, my neighbor tells me she and her son had seen a creepy black dog roaming around the back of Walmart. Okay? Couldn't be the same one, right? Just a coincidence. But then she tells me that when it spotted them, it took off at the speed of light. Then, my boyfriend comes home in somewhat of a panic a few weeks later and says, "I saw the damn dog again. It's just weird. It's not black like a dog would naturally be. It's black in the way an absence of light would be, is the best way I can describe it. All I can say is, be on the lookout when going behind stores where there is a forest area." I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on ground level, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a screen window that was open in her room, which was directly behind her bed, above the headboard. We were both in her room falling asleep that one night. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. Her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and woke her up. In the 3 to 4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong. We both looked back up in the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how my mother managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the ground floor, and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed, and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came, but didn't see any signs of forced entry. Only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night, with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. I moved to my dad's place when I was 10 and didn't know anyone in the area, except for the family my dad was friends with. A single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple years older than me, 12 at the time I met her. And we got to know each other a little over a couple years. We weren't close, but ended up having the same friends. One night my friend Dean was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work, which is where this gets terrifying and sad. Her mother has been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was let out recently. That night, Dean is hanging out with my friend. They get a knock on the door. My friend Dean thought it was just their mom. She knocks a certain way when coming in. Dean wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. Well, it wasn't her mom. It was the mentally ill sister of the lady her mom was helping. She came in, and this is where I don't know any details, and I'm glad I don't. All I know is that the mentally ill woman brutally murdered my friend that night in the house. The younger brother luckily got away to the neighbors to call the police. This all happened just a week before Christmas. About 5 years ago, my mom started dating a guy she met on a dating site. That part is fine. I had recently started dating the woman who would later become my wife, and we had met online. Anyway, my wife and I never really liked this guy. We didn't think he was mean or anything like that, just a little creepy. He was quiet, he kept his eyes closed a lot, and occasionally said odd things like offering my wife a chocolate and then popping one in his mouth, closing his eyes, and moaning as he let it melt in his mouth. One time my wife and I were visiting my mom, but she got called into work, so we waited at her house. Her boyfriend was over, but he spent the entire several hours just hanging out in her bedroom with the door closed. Just before Christmas, my mom and this guy started having some difficulties. My wife and I were visiting her for the holidays, and she dropped all of her problems on us, and we listened carefully and told her our opinions and suggested that she would be better off without him. She already had her mind made up, though, and decided to break up with him. On Christmas Eve. We spent the night at my mom's and got up early on Christmas morning to visit my dad at his house. We didn't plan to spend the night at my dad's, but we got snowed in, which was actually a nice Christmas surprise. The next day we left as soon as we could get through the snow, and my wife suggested that we stop by my mom's house on the way so that we could see if she was okay. My wife just had a really bad feeling about my mom's now ex-boyfriend. My mom's car was in the driveway, but that doesn't mean much because she lives close enough to work that she often walks, and it hadn't snowed in her town. She also never locks her door, which drives me crazy. So we let ourselves in. That's when we see red liquid oozing out of the refrigerator's water dispenser. It had filled up the spill container and was leaking onto the floor and had made a puddle. My wife screamed and I freaked out. I fully expected to see my mom's chopped up body in the freezer. I nervously opened the freezer to find a bag full of frozen cherries that had been opened, crammed into the freezer that was dripping onto the ice dispenser. I called my mom and she told us she was out to the shops with her best friend. It was a massive relief because I really thought my mom was chopped up by her creepy ex-boyfriend. Early 90s. I was around 6 to 7 years old. I'm at home with my sister who was 15 at the time. We grew up in a small Texas town. Everyone knows everybody. We are home alone this particular night, and my parents let my sister babysit me frequently. We always got along due to our age gap. Anyway, it is about 8 p.m. in the winter. It gets pretty damn cold. So it is dark, and we are in the common room, since that is where the TV was. Watching 60 Minutes or 48 Hours or Hard Copy or some shit. Those one-hour news pieces on CBS that chronicle large crimes in depth. Trafficking, murders, kidnappings and the like. Basically a gritty Lifetime special. This one was a typical story. Guy next door that was quiet went on a rampage in his next-door neighbor's house, mutilating them and kidnapping their young daughter. Well, the thing about our house common room is that the door leading to the backyard was a large glass door on a wall of floor to ceiling windows. Nothing but blackness beyond it unless you have the backlight on. We did not. The front door is on the other side of the room with a small entryway. This is a solid door, so you cannot see what is beyond it, with a glass storm door on the outside of it. About 45 minutes into the show, they are talking about the ongoing manhunt for this crazy guy, and suddenly, bam, 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 Front door bangs like crazy. We jumped up and screamed so loud. The only lights on in the house are the kitchen down the hall from the common room we were in and the light from the TV. We start thinking something on the porch had simply blown against the door. This was West Texas. Crazy strong winds out that way. Well, a minute or two of silence and us holding each other post-adrenaline overdose passes. Just when we are about to declare everything is safe, we hear the storm door on the outside of our front door close. Someone had to have opened that door to be able to bang on the front door like that. Now at this point, we are both frozen in the middle of the room on the floor, where we had been watching TV. My sister crawls over to the TV and turns it off. It was an old TV, so you had to turn that metal dial to switch it off. Now it is just us in a room dimly lit by the kitchen light down the hall. I do not remember how much time passed, but we kept making eye contact then looking at the front door. I remember this part vividly. I am on my knees sitting on my feet, and I turn around to look at the back wall of the windows and glass door. We hear and I see the back door knob turn. It was only locked on the knob. It rattles slightly as if someone is gently trying the handle. Not me or my sister is making a sound, we are just holding our breath. Then bam, 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 bam. Loud as hell someone is trying to force the door open, just jerking it back and forth. The whole wall of windows is vibrating violently, and I can see with each jerk of the door how my slight reflection gets fuzzy, then clear, then fuzzy. My sister flips her shit and screams bloody murder. I am still frozen on the floor. She gets up and basically drags me into her bedroom, slams the door, throws her mattress and anything she can in front of her door. Thankfully, she had remembered the phone, one of those ungodly heavy beige plastic long metal antenna portable phones. We still had to direct dial the sheriff there, and in her panic didn't remember the number. She just hit redial on the phone. It was one of her friends and she tells them in broken gasps that someone is trying to get into our house and needs to get there right now. I am curled up on the floor and cannot stop shaking. We don't hear anything else until we see the headlights of my sister's friend and her parents driving up to the house. We never did find out who was at the door or why. There were no signs of anything happening but a couple of scuff marks on the bottom of the back door that we could not remember if they were there beforehand or not. Nothing like that has happened to me or her since, but for damn sure we never forget to lock a door after that night.
If you enjoyed this story, please give a like and subscribe for more haunting stories. And remember, you never know what might be standing behind you watching your every move.